Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Green Tea Podcast. I am your host, Emma.
And this is Grazy Grace.
Today we have a really interesting episode, and it kind of starts with mental health. As mental health initiatives have come to the forefront of healthcare, traditional talk therapy has blown up over the past decade. Now, with the addition of virtual apps and therapy apps, right? You can speak with a therapist from the comfort of your own home, making therapy even more accessible to everyone throughout the world. So today, we're going to talk about that. Is talk therapy the only solution, or are there other explanations? Are alternative therapies a thing? We're going to dive into that.
Yes, and is there such thing as perfect therapy? Why are we always looking for the outside confirmation or something to help us and save us?
Oh my gosh, yes, you said that so well. It's so true. I think, of course, therapy is very valuable, but I think you make a really good point about that. You know, are we always searching for something outside of us? So I guess with that, have you tried traditional talk therapy, like on your own?
Wow. So once the first time I tried it in South Korea for the first time ever because I was having really bad insomnia. And it was because one of our, I guess I would say the level before CEO, he was like our top manager in our girl group. And he yelled at me because I made a little sound when I was singing. And that has brought me trauma. Like I was shaking for like 6 months. I couldn't sleep for 6 months straight. I didn't know what was wrong with me. So I went to therapy in South Korea. And I'm telling you, every therapist that I've met, even in America, when I've tried online therapy, they seem more depressed than me. And that's one thing I've noticed with therapists. It's like, I'm going there to feel good, but I don't know what's going on. Maybe they're taking in all the negative energy from all their clients. Maybe that's why. But all he did was prescribe me sleeping pills, anxiety pills. Here, go home. So I took some. I didn't like it. And that's my experience with traditional talk therapy. And even when I tried online, it was so convenient, but I just didn't get much out of it, honestly. Again, they seemed a lot more quiet and low energy compared to the clients. What do you think? Have you tried?
Yeah, I actually didn't even realize that observation that you made about how the therapist can sometimes seem more tired than the clients. But I actually would say that I agree with that based on what I've seen as well. I've also tried therapy, and you know, it's great. It's not to say that I don't like therapy, but I did notice that I had been seeing a therapist for a while, and she would regularly come to the sessions like 5 to 10 minutes late. And she was always telling me that, she didn't tell me anybody's protected health information, but she told me that the client that she meets with before she meets me is often in a crisis, like during their sessions. So because of it, she said, I can't just like leave her in the middle when she's having a crisis. So I have to find a way to like close out the session before I meet with you. And even then she comes on this, like she looks just so frazzled and so like, oh my God, exhausted. And sometimes I think to myself, I'm like, is this going to burden you? Like me having this conversation with you? Like, I'm not so sure really at this point. I hadn't really put that together until just now, actually. So I definitely agree with that. And from my experience, I had a very similar experience to what you just shared. I remember one of the first times that I ever tried therapy. I had been sexually assaulted in college, and I went home and, oh yeah.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah. And I had gone home, decided to see a therapist because I was like, wow, this is definitely stuck inside my brain and my body like forever. And I went to a therapist who was a woman, so I feel super comfortable. She was a bit older than me. And I remember when I went to the session with her, the first question she asked me was, are you sure that you were assaulted? Which, without getting super graphic, obviously, into it, yes, I was definitely assaulted. Like there really wasn't any questionable gray area about that. So that felt a little bit odd, but I was like, okay, maybe she's just trying to be thorough and it's just the way that she's delivering this question. But then she started asking me, well, what were you wearing? And I'm like, oh boy, here we go. Now we have like,
No way.
yeah, now we have like, I'm like, skirt, flag on the play. You know what I'm saying? This is like not okay. So, I think she could tell based on like my reaction that maybe that wasn't the best question to ask me. And I was like, well, I don't really understand how that's relevant, but to answer your question, like I was wearing jeans, Converse, and like a hooded sweatshirt, So she decided also, like the practitioner that you saw, that the best way to handle it was to put me on antidepressants and an anxiolytic and anti-anxiety medication. I took it for like 2 months, and during those 2 months, I had like the worst nightmares I've ever had in my life. Like I would die in
Wow.
my dream every single night. So I was like, okay,
Every
I
single night?
yeah,
Wow.
like every night I would dream, it would be terrible, and I would die. There was
Wow,
like one
wow.
dream that I had. I mean, not to get graphic, but there was one dream that I had where I was on like an overhead subway in Chicago, and um, this like group of people came in and just like murdered everybody in the subway, and like my family was there, and it was just like really graphic, like getting
Wow.
watching them die, and then they killed me, and then like I died in the dream, and it was really weird, because that's never happened to me before.
Hmm.
But I was like, wow, this never happened before I had took these medications, before I was taking these medications. So all that to say, I have gone to therapy since then and had better experiences. But I think I've always been interested in branching outside of that, not because one is better than the other. Some people do really, really well with traditional talk therapy, but I wanted to see what else was out there. So that's what brought me to the conversation we're having today, which is, alternative healing methods and things that might not be recognized as, healing modalities by like the American Health Association or something like that, but that people are very into now. Yeah, thank you, by the way, for that. Yes, it was the first time that that had ever happened to me. And I think what was so confusing for me about it was that I guess the perpetrator, the person that did it, was somebody that I had thought was a friend of mine, sort of. We weren't super close
Mm,
friends, but it was someone that I had sort of started to develop a friendship with. And so I never expected him to behave in that way toward me. However, I did actually find out a few months after that that he struggles with mental health illness. And he,
mm,
I think, ended up like leaving school, withdrawing from the university or something for his own like mental health reasons, and had to be, I don't know if he was
mm,
committed or not, but I found out after the fact, that there was a lot more going on behind the scenes for that person than just that one interaction. And it was interesting because in the middle of while it was happening, like in the middle of kind of the assault in a way, I remember he just kind of like went like blank behind the eyes. Like there was a moment
mm.
where like this
Wow.
light switch flipped, and I felt like, wow, I'm not even really engaging with the same person that I was engaging with literally 5 seconds ago. And
Hmm.
I've heard of this happening in assaults, of other people, or that I've read about or heard about, that it can happen like that, where someone experiences some type of, switch, or for some people, a psychotic break, as they call it, or something. Um, so there is a part of me that, I had to do a lot of healing with that, obviously. But interestingly enough, there is a part of me that also feels a lot of empathy for someone like that, because like to struggle so much with your own health that like you don't understand reality, or like reality always is escaping you. It must be tough, like to live like that.
Did you end up reporting it, or how did you feel about doing that or not doing that?
Yeah, so I did report it
Mm,
to like the university police. But to be honest, I wasn't entirely, I think, as transparent as I could have been about it,
mm,
because I, one, I was just shocked. Like, I was still in shock over the fact that that had just happened. And
mhm.
I also think there was a part of me that felt the way that many people feel, which is I didn't want to ruin this person's life in a way. So I was still honest about what happened, but I do think I could have pushed
Mm,
more for some type of change or accountability. I think they definitely took a report down, and they ended up telling me that he was already in their system for not other sexual assaults, but other like I don't know if regular assaults, I guess, like getting into bar
yeah.
fights and beating other
Mm,
people up and stuff like that. He didn't beat me up. It wasn't the same type, obviously, but
mhm.
but yeah, so they did say they were going to try to keep a better eye on that, obviously, because now this person is like on their radar again. But that's all that happened at the time. I think I was at a place myself where I was still struggling with like what is the best way to go about something like this. It was also at the time or at a time when I didn't know if I had evidence or like proof, if there were
Mm.
cameras where I could say like this is exactly what happened. I believe he had been drinking as well, so like things get a little hairy when that type of those details come into play.
Mhm.
So yeah, sorry, I hope that answers your question.
No, no, I totally understand because not to, I don't think this was on my radar to talk about, but as you said, like, I've also had experience of being assaulted, but when I was 10 years old. And I ended up telling my parents, like, when I was 20, like 10 years later, you know? And I was kind of hoping my parents to go to that guy's parents because they used to be close and say something about it. But not to blame my parents at all, but they were like, oh, it's been a while. Like, I don't know what to do now. So I think if I was in my parents' position, I would have done something more about it. So, you don't know how to report it because, like you said, is there video evidence? Like, what am I going to do with this information? Or people are going to believe me? So, I think a lot of the times, like, it's definitely gray area where you've been affected, but it's hard to report about it.
Yeah. Yeah. First of all, I'm sorry that you went through that. Also 10, that's so young. Like that's so young to be violated in
Yeah.
some way. But I think I was going to say that I totally agree with you that it can be difficult, especially when you have these questions in your head around like, are people going to believe me? Is there evidence and stuff like that? And
Mhm.
I know you said if you were your parents, like that's what you would do in retrospect, but do
Mhm.
you feel personally for yourself like you would have done something differently had you known differently or not so much?
I mean, when you're 10, I think that's kind of hard because as a kid, you feel embarrassed. I remember the first thing was like, I feel embarrassed. I can't tell anybody. Oh my God. A second encounter, I actually talked about this on my YouTube years later, but I would think I was like 23 or 24. No, I was like 25. I was in Korea. I was at a club and there was a famous idol and he was known to be, I could tell he was a little bit very overly sexual, and we were at a club and he touched my down there and he took my hand and took it to his thingy, but it was at a club. But back then it was before this whole internet talking out, the Me Too movement. So even if that happened to you and it's not actually being raped, like you kind of try to like be like, okay, he was drunk, he was blah blah blah. But it isn't okay. And I think if it was me now in 2024, I would have absolutely definitely reported it.
Yeah, I agree that in some form society has helped us out. We've moved more in this direction of,
Yeah.
hey, like sexual assault happens all the time and like even things that
Mhm.
aren't outward like or obvious, I'm sorry, sexual assault, like even things like what you just said, like
Yeah.
unwarranted touching, or things like that are starting to actually be taken seriously, which I think is really important, and things that can land a lot of us in therapy, which to your point, there can be a lot of shame around, something happening to you
Mhm.
and a lot of beliefs around like, oh, this must have been my fault or I should have done this better and maybe that wouldn't have happened. And so I know that, exploring other alternative therapies has helped me to really navigate the emotional landscape.
So, what would be the first level of therapy, alternative therapy that you've tried?
So I don't know if this would really count, but I know that like in researching it, it's considered like a mind body therapy, and I'm sure many of you are familiar with it. It's yoga, actually. I
Mm.
have tried yoga. I used to do yoga regularly when I was a dancer, and this is not to say that I don't like yoga, of course, but I found diminishing returns with yoga. That could have also been just because of the age that I was at and the time of my life that I was in. I was very active. And so I think a lot of yoga for me felt more like exercise than it did like a spiritual practice. Um, and I had certain, like, I don't want to say injuries, but mobility issues, for example, that I
Mm.
felt were kind of exacerbated by certain things in yoga. And I spent a lot of time trying to be very precise with my movements. So I think that that also
Mhm.
contributed to what I perceive as ineffectiveness of yoga for me. However, I have tried it like as my age now, and
Mm-hmm.
I still don't really enjoy it that much.
Really?
Yeah, it's all right. I don't hate it,
Oh.
but it just doesn't really, you know, it doesn't really work for me.
I've actually, like you said, when I was younger, I didn't understand yoga. I'm like, damn, like I'm stiff. This hurts. Why am I doing this? Like it's so slow. And like, what do you mean breathing and like body? But as I got older and I got into spirituality, and it's the same with acupuncture and all the other spiritual exercise. If once I've learned spirituality, once I learned that breathing has to do everything with your body, and spiritually your mind and your body's all connected, I start to enjoy yoga. I was like, I understand why you need to stretch and do all these crazy movements and why yoga is a form of meditation as well.
Definitely. It's funny, really quick, that you say that because um, one thing that I found surprising for myself is that I didn't really enjoy yoga, but I do like Tai Chi. And it's obviously like a
Mm.
lot slower, but I think it's because, I mean, this is just my assumption, but I feel like I move at such a rapid pace that something like Tai Chi really like allows me to slow down and not feel like I'm trying to do 25 things at once. So it kind of
Mm-hmm.
feels like I'm not getting something out of it. Again, not saying that you don't get anything out of yoga, it's just my experience. Um, so yeah, I can attest to what you're saying though, where when you start to realize that like the breath and the body, what is it? Breath initiated movement is such a
Mm-hmm.
thing. I think it can open your mind to things like yoga or Tai Chi and actually help you feel like you're getting something out of it and connecting on a
Mm.
more spiritual level. With that said, what is like the first level for you of alternative?
I've tried acupuncture and float therapy, which is sensory deprivation. But acupuncture, I know a lot of people are like, well, that's for the body aches. But actually, when I went to my acupuncturist and I told her I have bad anxiety, she would put pins in the middle of my chest or like in the wrist. And that's supposed to slow your heart rate down. It helps with anxiety and sleep. So it does help the mind as well. And it did help me. But again, it's something you have to go to. You know, you have to put the pin needle. So I know it's kind of slow and you have to be committed to it. I say that's like level one. Sensory deprivation is basically when you have no sound, no light, nothing, and you're floating in thousands of salts water. And it's supposed to make you feel like you're a baby in a womb. There's nobody's calling you. You don't have your boss. You're not thinking about anything basically. It was actually very scary at first, but what helped me was to realize that the only scariness or seeing ghosts, seeing demonic things, it's all in your head and it's not technically a real threat. It really helped me to realize that at the end of the day, if you could sit with yourself very quietly with your mind only, everything that you perceive in life, good or bad, is up to you. Sensory deprivation is great, but it didn't like have a life changing experience for me. It's great time to time, like once in a while, like every 6 months I do it. How about you?
Yeah, you took the words honestly right out of my mouth and said them probably better than I would have, which is that it's cool. I like it. It was an interesting experience to be in that like complete sensory deprivation, no sound, no feeling, no
Mm-hmm.
nothing. But I agree that it didn't necessarily have a super strong impact,
Mm.
necessarily on like my well-being. But I would definitely do it, say like every 6 months or every 3 months or something.
Yeah, I do have to comment that these level ones that we're talking about, I do realize it helps me a little, and then you kind of come back to your life problems. It doesn't solve it. So I was constantly digging on what can actually really help me, and that got me to level two, which is I actually tried past life hypnosis. I've talked about this on my YouTube, but have you ever tried hypnosis?
Have, but not, yeah, but not like guided by a practitioner. I think the way that
Oh.
you did. I want to hear, like, this is so interesting to me, so I want to hear your experience. But wait, tell
Mm.
me about this, like past life hypnosis. What did you find out? I'm so curious.
So I do want to distinguish. There's like the regular hypnosis that a lot of people traditionally know as, on YouTube, you see 3, 2, 1, you fall asleep. Somebody reached out to me a couple of days ago and I've tried it it's not a spiritual hypnosis, it's like the regular hypnosis. Basically what it is going down deep into your subconsciousness and you are completely quieting your mind. And that's why if the practitioner says, you forgot your name. You're going to forget number 4. Technically, it would work because you're not using your survival mode anymore. You're completely in only your right side of the brain. So I do understand why it can work, but I think for someone like me, it didn't work on me because I couldn't let go of that survival mode. But for me, the past life and more spiritual hypnosis, meditation worked so much better. So I know this lady and she does past life hypnosis, which is literally putting you into a deep meditation. It's not like controlling your mind. I actually had a lot of anxiety about it. Like, there's no way I can see a past life. What the heck? But she put me in such a deep mode. Basically, you're shutting off your left brain, which is your survival, and right brain is your creativity. And she says that you're going to make things up. It's going to seem like you're making it up. But that's how it works. It's just like your dream, your imagination. So I am sitting there, lying there. By the way, this took whole day about 8-9 hours. Actual hypnosis was about 4 or 5 hours. And I started to actually see things. And at first I was like, this is a dream, I'm making it up. She's like, how, do you feel like you're a male or female? Look down. So I'm imagining him looking down and I'm like, for some reason I feel like a male. So I said, I feel like a male. And then you continue growing. Long story short, I was a male in my past life. Ever since I was Grace, when I was 10 years old, 6 years old, I remember I had this vision of this very Victorian era house. And that exact house that I've always been drawing as a kid. Since I grew up in Korea, I'd never seen European stuff. So I'm like, where did this vision come from? And when I did the past life hypnosis, that's the exact house that I've seen. The past life hypnosis, you feel strong emotions. That's how I knew it was real. It wasn't just vision, it was like emotions that I've never felt before. And I started crying in the hypnosis because the whole life was that I was very successful financially. I got up there, but I neglected everybody else. I neglected my wife, my kids. In this life, in Grace, when I asked my higher self, why did you show me this past life? It was the fact that I was repeating my patterns from my past life, of how I was neglecting a lot of people and very selfish. The lesson to learn is that you have to share love and you have to go about success with other people, and connection and networking is very important. And that really helped me to actually realize my purpose in this life. That emotions and what I've seen was so real, Emma. And you and I always talk about how we met and why I wanted to work with you and become friends with you is ever since that had past life hypnosis, like my life has changed.
Wow, that's so incredible that you got so much out of it and that it was so vivid for you. Like you said, you felt those emotions so strongly, and like even the visions that you can pinpoint from your childhood were back immediately in your field of vision, I guess. That's crazy. Do you know if that was your like most recent like past life, if you will, or does it not necessarily distinguish that?
Interesting. I guess you will never know, but from the practitioner, she explained that your higher self will show you the one that's more relevant to you in this life. So I guess technically right before this life. Somewhere in my body, a male in Europe or in America, I don't know, is there in a casket. Can you think of that? Your past life is dead somewhere on this earth.
I mean, I've heard like these insane stories about like kids, like little kids telling their parents like, oh yeah, I was this sailor person before, and then they'll like look it up online and they'll find out that person like really existed. And I'm like, oh my God, their body is like somewhere on earth right now, or, in the ground or wherever. Wow, that's crazy. I wanted to know also, wait, what did I want to know? Oh, the pattern that you just mentioned of kind of neglecting people and prioritizing like career and stuff. Do you feel like that's a pattern that you were like blind to until you did the past life hypnosis and then it came into your field and you were like, oh my gosh, I'm doing this? Or were you already kind of aware that you had that habit, but maybe didn't realize how much it was?
It's so interesting you say that because 2023, beginning of 2023, I've explained to you personally that I was going through a tough time relationship wise and like my identity wise. And I got this overwhelming feeling that I told my different friends, I feel like I need to connect with people. I had like one friend and I didn't know anybody else, but I just knew that I had to branch out. And I think the universe literally pushed me to the edge and like threw me into the water and said, you're going to have a tough time and you're going to find friends and like connecting with people. So I felt that energy 6-7 months before I did the past life hypnosis. And then I did the hypnosis and then like everything made sense. Why I was feeling the certain way, why I felt from the kid, I felt very selfish, why I felt very jealous of other girls going through K-pop industry. All the uncomfortableness that you felt, like it was answered through the past life hypnosis. I'm not saying that that's gonna be the case for everybody, but it was definitely for me. So yes, I've seen and felt energetically a couple months before I did the past life.
It's interesting because I haven't done that. I've had people like approach me before, tell me like certain things about like my past life, like very unannounced. Yeah, like I remember one time I was walking down the street. I live in New York, and this was several years ago. Yeah, I had heard her kind of yelling, like, excuse me, like, but first of all, I didn't think she was talking to me. And second of all, again, I thought if she is talking to me, maybe she's trying to sell me something or like, and I don't know if I really want to have to deal with that. It's also New York, so you get some interesting characters out here who
Yeah.
might not actually be trying to talk to you. So yeah, she like literally ran up to me for like, she chased me for like 2 blocks, two long, like not long blocks, but 2 blocks. And yeah, so she told me, you spent a lot of times, you've lived a lot of past lives as a woman during critical historical times. So being a black woman back when like black people were starting to really fight for their own individual rights, and being she didn't say a witch, but basically like a witch during the Salem witch trials.
Mm.
And it's actually interesting because you just mentioned that story of having this vision of that Victorian house. You don't know where it's come from. I have, when I was younger, used to always get this vision of like, it's actually horrible, but like me basically getting burned at the stake. And I always wondered,
What?
like, yeah, I always like wondered, like, why do I have this vision? Because fortunately, knock on wood, that's never happened to me. And I've never been in that situation. Um, so when she said that, I remember like a light bulb going off in my head, and I was like, wow, could it be? Like that's crazy.
So did she end up like selling you, be like, well, I'm a psychic, so come to my studio?
She didn't actually.
Oh,
She just had said, I hope this is not too intrusive, but that's just what I needed to tell you. I just feel like you really need to know that. And
wow.
I was waiting for her to be like, okay, so like here's my card, whatever. But she didn't do that. She's like, I hope you have a great, blessed day, all the things. And I asked her though, I was like, are you like a psychic, or like do you have a business doing this? And she said yes, but she at no point tried to like push her services onto me, which was really interesting because I think a lot of times part of the reasons why people think that psychics or intuitive healers are like shady is because
Mm-hmm.
sometimes they do that, where it comes off very much like they're just trying to push their own agenda instead of just tell you something. So I found that to be very enlightening. It did definitely resonate with me. um so yeah, it's just interesting that you've also had some experiences like that.
That is so funny that she would just, I mean, like she just saw random people and be like, I have to tell her past life.
Yeah, I want to say this is maybe back in 2016 or something. This was a long time
Oh,
ago.
wow.
Yeah, so um I didn't get her number or her information. But if I saw her again, or if she ever approached me again, I think I definitely would, and just like explore that a little bit.
I was gonna say, like, Emma and I recently went to the psychic that I really stand by, and she has told me some crazy stuff. But I do have to say, first of all, some things that she predicted didn't come true. But what she's really good at is like matching the energy of the present and the past. And maybe like a little bit of like near future. So the psychic that we talked to recently, when I was talking to her, she was telling me, "Hey, something came up. Are you doing some business with your friend?" And I was like, what business? Because I've never told anybody about our podcast. And she says that you guys are delaying this business because you're a little afraid or something's happening. Like you guys are delaying it. Like there is like a specific timing, January and February, that you should be uploading. And the crazy thing was, like, she actually guessed who I was doing the co-host with, Emma. Which was crazy because Emma never told anybody. I told nobody. So this whole energy thing, I do believe is real.
Totally agree. I definitely believe that just because we can't see it doesn't mean it's not there. And I definitely
Mm-hmm.
do believe that certain people, I mean, all of us, I think all of us can connect to that realm, if you will. But I definitely do think that some people have a stronger connection to it naturally, or have obviously really honed that psychic, if you will, as we call it in layman's terms, that psychic
Mm-hmm.
connection. But yeah, it's absolutely real. And that was so mind blowing to me. I remember when you told me that, Grace was like, I have to tell you something. So like, I was like, oh my
Yeah.
God, tell me. And I was just blown away. I was mainly blown away by the fact that she guessed who I
Yeah.
was. And it wasn't just a
Exactly.
general, like, oh, whoever your friend is that you're doing business with, like, you should do something. It was like, this is a specific collaboration that I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, that's insane.
The level 3 of the therapy that helped me is actually relating big to spirituality, which I've actually been trained as a Theta healer. And Theta healing is going deep into your subconsciousness and working with spiritual and your own higher self to get to the bottom root cause of your problems, such as if you have relationship problems or if you have anxiety, that's not really the root cause. It's not other people. It's why are you reacting that way to the other person? And usually the root cause is like worthlessness, or some people are afraid that nothing exists out of them. So you go and find the root cause and you try to change it and replace it with something more positive, such as unconditional love. There isn't just a root cause within yourself. There's soul trauma, there is your higher self trauma, there is a past trauma, and there's trauma called the DNA, where it just goes down your roots in your parents. Like your parents' trauma is actually also within you in your DNA. So you can replace that by asking the creator to change that for you. And you might be thinking, how is that even possible? Well, at the end of the day, everything is how you perceive. And if you can change your mindset and how you think and the root cause, anything is possible.
That's really awesome. Do you think, I'm just curious, but do you think there's a point, there's too much of that, like too much trying to fix the root of this thing? Or do you think that, there's no negative, results no matter how much you utilize theta healing?
I don't think that there is too much, because at the end of the day, with like the sensory deprivation, it is just you and your mind. That's it, period. There's nothing else really that you're perceiving other than your mind. Like you are a projection of me and my eyes and my mind. So if I'm going to my root cause to change that, it will change everything. But again, it is not 100% full. Nothing is full bulletproof at the end of the day. It's the main thing that has completely changed my life.
Do you do it on yourself, like regularly?
Yes. Every time I meditate, there is like a little like structure you gotta go to get up to the creator. It's called the seventh plane of existence, and the first plane is like the microscopic level, all the way 7, which is the creator, which is we are all one.
For me, I don't know if I mentioned it or not, but the second thing for me, which is I know where you had mentioned the past life hypnosis, for me was I don't want to say meditation as in that's somehow lower than the third one that I'm going to say, but meditation for me has been absolutely life changing. And it's helped me to, in some form, maybe not in the same way, obviously, that theta healing does, but really understand like my own subconscious thoughts and like get myself to a place where I don't want to say still enough, but almost like still enough that they can come from that space into like my conscious mind.
Mm-hmm.
And it's totally changed my life because I absolutely agree with you that when you really take care, and I don't mean like with bubble baths and like fruit, although that's still wonderful. When you really take care of like the inner world that you have, your thoughts, like the thoughts that you have, the emotions that you're storing within your body, like all these things, your behaviors even, once you have that, I think aligned in a certain way, a lot of doors open up for you. And like you said, you stop really seeking outside of yourself for answers
Mm-hmm.
or validation to tell you like this is right or this is wrong. I mean, how many times can we think of a situation where even the conversation we're having right now, like
Yeah.
some people might say that meditation didn't do anything for them, and that yoga was like the one thing that changed their whole life, right? Everybody is so different. Our needs are different. The way that we perceive experiences is very different.
How do you do meditation?
But I generally switch up my meditations. Sometimes I'll do like guided meditations. I like to sit on like a cushion, or I know they have meditation
Mm.
benches. Um, and sometimes I'll do the guided meditations if I'm really struggling to like get my brain to, it's almost like if I'm mentally not stimulated, I suppose, and I'm feeling really like low. Doing guided meditations I found helps to get at least my energy kind of flowing and gives me some type of direction. But I generally like to do either ambient sound, like just not listening to anything, or like certain tunes. My goal is always usually to be able to do like 45 minutes at least, but sometimes I can't always
Wow.
do that long. It really depends actually on how frequently I'm meditating.
Do you think you get like downloads during meditation?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's something that's really important actually about meditation is sometimes we go into meditation expecting like to have some crazy thing revealed to us or like, oh, I'm going to meditate and somehow my life is going to be like a million times better after this meditation. And it doesn't always happen that way. So the times I've noticed that when I sit in meditation and I go into it thinking like, oh, I hope I really get an answer that I'm looking for, I usually don't get it, because I'm so attached to that outcome. I'm thinking very
Mm-hmm.
hard about it. But the times where I just go in and allow myself to accept the state that I'm in, whether it's an overactive mind or, feeling anxious about not having the answer that I'm looking for. And I can just kind of be in that present moment, literally as it is, and accept what is happening in my reality as it is. That's usually when I do receive like that type of download or insight. Most of the time it comes for me in the form of hearing it in my head. It sounds like my own like higher self basically telling me like
Mm-hmm.
the answer. Say that I'm seeking an answer for something, or actually it'll come as a vision in my mind's eye, if you will, sort of like the flash of like a film, like in a movie. Like it'll just be like a really quick scene that pans out. Before I did the astrology workshop, I had like a really quick vision in my mind, like a few months before, of me doing it. Granted, the the background of the
Mm.
image was different. Like it wasn't the same venue that I was in, but the same like workshop and the same type of energy and crowd is exactly what happened like 2 months later. I don't know. What about you? Have you ever had any experiences like that?
When after I learned theta healing, I've also learned that anytime you get visions or yourself telling you good things, like if something's bad happening, everything's gonna be okay, or anything positive that you hear, you think it's from yourself. Well, it is. But I learned that that is actually could be your higher self telling you the positive things and just take it. Like why do we like sweep away the positive things we tell ourselves even when we're in a crisis? That's actually your higher self telling you encouragement and telling you it's going to be okay. So I've learned to speak high of yourself and good of yourself and really absorb that.
For me, the top ranking, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
modality, if you will, is one that I don't think is actually considered a healing modality, but it's had such an impact on my life that I just had to like throw it in here. I'm sure you all can guess what it is, but it's astrology.
Mm-hmm.
Astrology has changed my life in ways that I really don't think I could describe effectively in words. I've been interested in astrology since I was 12 years old, ironically, around my Jupiter return, which is when Jupiter returns to the same sign it was in when you're born. It's like a time of growth, expansion, learning, aligned and destined, if you will, divine education. And astrology started off initially as a hobby and also actually kind of like an escape for me because I would read about astrology because I felt very kind of like misfit. I felt like I didn't really fit in my social environment and the environments that I was in at that time in my life. And so it was almost like this like little escape for me. I could go home and just like open the book and read about astrology. But as I got older, it became really a tool that I could use to better understand myself. And the only thing about astrology for me that I don't want to say wish was part of it, but something that I know is very important is something that you said earlier, which is the mind like body connection, right? Like everything is connected. And so a lot of
Mm-hmm.
astrology is, I understand astrology through my mind, through my brain, like reading about it, interpreting it, analyzing it, and being like, oh, how does this apply to my life? There isn't really like a body component of it, like something like meditation or even yoga, where there's literally a body component. However, it's interesting because some people would say that you could look at the chart and it could tell you, like, based on the sixth house or based on Mars or something, this is something that you could do, like a physical activity that you could do or a self care or spiritual activity that you could engage in. Um, and some people, that's how they find their way into their idea of like the perfect therapy, right? So, yeah, astrology
Mm-hmm.
has helped me really more than I could ever explain. And I think the main thing that it's helped me to understand is how to accept all the different parts of who I am, both when they operate from their both when they operate in the light and in the shadow. Because I think that there is this tendency that we have to reject our shadow sides. Like the parts of ourselves that we are embarrassed about or ashamed about, or that we know, I was acting like a little, aggressive there or something. Like we try our best to pretend like they don't exist. When we introduce ourselves to people, we don't lead with saying, hey, I am emotionally manipulative, I am aggressive, I am, all these things, we try our best to hide that away from people. And I think that's actually one of the things that causes a lot of strife in people's lives, is putting themselves up to this standard of like needing to only be like love and light 24/7 all the time. And it's like, sometimes we don't, that's not going to happen. Like we're going to have days where we make mistakes, or we act from a side of ourselves that we're not proud of. Or there are even situations where like, you're in a work environment and you're stuck at a job that doesn't resonate with you, and it brings out the worst side of you because of like the environment. It might not even be how you really are usually, right? But that's the thing is I spent a lot of my life trying to just be my version of perfect, and to only cultivate and only show the sides of myself that I was proud of or that I felt would be accepted by others. And so astrology really helped me to see these other shadow aspects, if you will, of myself, and acknowledge them as equally as important as anything else. And when you can integrate that, it really, it really helps. It really helped me on my own journey to wholeness, from the inside out.
My life has changed because I don't know much about astrology, but ever since I met you, you told me so much about myself. And one thing that I really resonated, you told me recently, was you're like, oh, based on your charts, if you feel angry, you should actually express it. And I am the type of person to be very passive. I do not like to show my anger to anybody, and I feel like I kind of build it up. But recently, like I said, my 2024 resolution is for me to be more honest with other people and myself. So if I am frustrated, I sometimes show it. Not to the extreme extent, but taking your astrology advice, I want to be honest,
Yeah, and I actually feel like we've talked about this before, but I actually think that's one of the things that both of us like we're both trying to work on for different reasons. I know I had mentioned, I think it was the moon and Mars and Aries that you have. For me, it's Aries in the 12th house. I appreciate so much that, that you are open about how you're feeling, especially, because we have to work really closely together when we're doing something like a podcast. We meet every week just to even brainstorm and go over some things that like could improve. And the reality is, if either of us are in a position where we're not comfortable being honest about what we have to say, it's going to negatively impact both of us, and no one is served by that. So yeah, I'm really glad that that resonated with you.
I think there is a perfect therapy for individuals. For me, theta healing, along with, many other different things, worked. For you, astrology was like the perfect thing. So there is a perfect therapy for different people. How about you?
I totally agree with you. I'm on the same page. I definitely think that there is no universal perfect therapy, but individually, I definitely think there can be something that feels perfect for each of us. And that's just a journey that each of us individually are meant to go on our own. And sometimes it will definitely take trying several things before you come to the right modality. Sometimes for some people, it doesn't even look like what we're talking about, where, we've tried all these different things like sensory deprivation, astrology, acupuncture, before we landed on, say, theta healing. Even the concept of finding the right therapist is like dating. You have to maybe go to a few of them before you find someone that is like the right match for you. So yeah, I'm definitely on the same page with you.
Yeah, I hope everybody, you guys find your perfect therapy. Nothing is bulletproof. At the end of the day, we all have, life problems, but we're all on this earth together. So let me know what you guys have thought about today's episode.
We would love to hear if you have a perfect therapy or something that really works for you. And until then, we will see you on the next episode.
Bye.